So, that's the worst part of it. Or when you don't think your dad's proud of you, that's I knew that he was in other areas.
It's not every day that a Hollywood legend speaks his mind this openly. But at 80 years old, Sam Elliott, yes, the mustached cowboy with the gravelly voice and a 6-decade career, has decided he's done keeping quiet. Known for his no-nonsense style and deep love for old-school values, Elliott just revealed the names of 6 actors he truly couldn't stand working with. For years, he kept it professional, never spilling tea. But now, he's letting it all out. Let's dive into the candid confessions of a man who's seen it all. Actor number 1, Kevin Costner. At first glance, Sam Elliott and Kevin Costner seem like they come from the same world. Both have deep voices, rugged looks, and long histories with Western roles. But to Sam Elliott, that's where the similarities end. Elliott has lived and breathed Western values all his life. He was raised around ranches and believed a cowboy was more than just a role. It was a way of life. So when Kevin Costner stepped into the Western scene with movies like Wyatt Earp and later the TV hit Yellowstone, Elliott wasn't impressed. In fact, he was annoyed. To him, Costner didn't feel real. He called Costner Hollywood's version of a cowboy. That wasn't a compliment. Elliott thought Costner's cowboys looked too clean, too perfect, too scripted. He felt there was no dust, no grit, and no truth in what Costner was doing. Elliott didn't hold back. He once said Costner's performances were all about clean boots, polished lines, and perfect lighting. In Elliott's mind, real cowboys didn't look like that. They worked hard, got dirty, and didn't care about how they looked on camera. Costner plays a rancher like it's dress-up, Elliott said, like he's cosplaying something he doesn't really understand. One of Elliott's sharpest criticisms was about Yellowstone, the show that made Costner even more famous. While millions of fans loved it, Elliott wasn't among them. He called it a soap opera with a cowboy hat. That comment alone showed just how far apart the two men were when it came to Western storytelling. For Elliott, Yellowstone was all flash, fancy houses, dramatic family fights, and big-budget visuals. But in his view, it missed the heart of the West. Their differences didn't just stay behind the scenes. At one point, Elliott was actually offered a cameo role on Yellowstone. He didn't even think about it. He said no right away. To Elliott, saying yes would have meant accepting a version of the West he didn't believe in. And that wasn't something he was willing to admit. A producer later said, Sam's rejection wasn't rude, it was quiet, but it spoke volumes. That moment wasn't just a missed opportunity. It became a turning point. Elliott made it clear that he wouldn't be part of something he didn't respect, even if it was popular. And when both men were in the same room, you could feel the tension. One event organizer said, "They didn't speak, they didn't fight. But when Sam walked in, the air changed. You could feel it." What really set them apart was their view of what Westerns should be. To Elliott, Westerns are about more than guns and horses. They're about values, honor, silence, hard work, and moral strength. His cowboys don't talk much, but their actions speak louder. He believes in subtle acting. A glance, a pause, or a slow walk can say more than pages of dramatic dialogue. Costner, on the other hand, brought something different. His Westerns had big music, big drama, and big scenes. His cowboys looked good, lived large, and often acted like TV stars. That didn't sit well with Elliott. He once said Costner's version of the West looked like a postcard, filtered and romanticized. It was glossy, neat, and too far from the real thing. Elliott wanted grit. He wanted pain. He wanted truth. To him, Costner's cowboys felt fake. Even though fans loved Yellowstone, Elliott couldn't get past what he saw as its flaws. It was too pretty, too dramatic, too far from what he believed the West was all about. This wasn't just about two actors not getting along. It was about a bigger question. What should a Western really be? For Elliott, the answer is clear. Westerns should be raw and real, not shiny and scripted. He felt Costner had taken something sacred and turned it into entertainment. And that crossed a line. It's rare for Elliott to name names. He's always been the strong, silent type. But turning 80 changed things. He decided to speak his truth. And Kevin Costner? He made the top of that list. Not because of fame, not because of jealousy, but because, in Elliott's eyes, Costner didn't respect the code. And when it comes to cowboys, Sam Elliott always lives by the code. Actor number 2, Benedict Cumberbatch. In 2021, Sam Elliott made headlines for an unexpected reason: a public takedown of the power of the dog. His criticism wasn't vague, polite, or carefully worded. It was sharp, raw, and unapologetically blunt. And the main target? Benedict Cumberbatch. The film, which received critical acclaim and multiple award nominations, did not impress Elliott in the slightest. In fact, it offended him. The moment happened during a podcast appearance. Elliott was asked his thoughts on The Power of the Dog, a slow-burning Western drama directed by Jane Campion. Without hesitation, Elliott launched into a fierce critique. His tone made it clear. He wasn't just disappointed. He was insulted. He zeroed in on Cumberbatch's portrayal of Phil Burbank, a rancher hiding layers of emotional complexity. But for Elliott, it didn't matter how many critics praised the performance. He didn't buy a second of it. And unlike most Hollywood veterans who avoid direct conflict, Elliott said exactly what was on his mind. Elliott's biggest issue was with Cumberbatch himself. The accent, the mannerisms, the walk. All of it rubbed Elliott the wrong way. He mocked Cumberbatch's voice, saying it sounded nothing like any rancher he had ever met. He scoffed at the British actor's body language and stiff movements. At one point, Elliott even said, "What the hell does this Brit know about the American West?" It wasn't just a dig, it was a challenge. He called it a prissy portrayal of a Western rancher, a phrase that quickly went viral. To Elliott, Cumberbatch looked like he was playing a cowboy in a school play, not in a serious film. He believed the entire character was built on stereotypes and drama rather than any real understanding of the Western spirit. For someone like Elliott, who grew up around cattle, horses, and dusty ranch roads, it was almost offensive. He felt the film turned the image of the cowboy into something fragile and unrecognizable. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Fans of the film, critics, and Hollywood insiders lit up social media. Many accused Elliott of being out of touch and overly critical. Others went further, calling him a relic from a time when masculinity and tradition ruled Hollywood. People said Elliott was gatekeeping the genre, refusing to let it evolve. After all, The Power of the Dog was praised for exploring deeper emotions and showing a more complex side of the Western male identity. But Elliott didn't care. Even as headlines poured in and social media debated his words, Elliott stayed silent. He didn't tweet. He didn't apologize. He didn't try to soften the blow. To him, this wasn't about opinions. It was about protecting something sacred. Meanwhile, Benedict Cumberbatch took the high road. He didn't respond directly. In interviews, he simply said he respected Elliott's right to speak his mind, but hoped the film would continue to reach audiences in its own way. This only fueled the conversation more. One side saw Elliott as a brave voice for tradition. The other saw him as someone standing in the way of change. Despite the controversy, Elliott never backpedaled. In fact, he doubled down during follow-up interviews. He made it clear he wasn't attacking Cumberbatch as a person, but as a representation of something bigger. He believed the power of the dog disrespected the very tradition it claimed to honor. To Elliott, Westerns are supposed to show a specific world. Tough men, rough land, hard choices. Not slow piano music and poetic shots of open fields. Not ranchers who read poetry in secret or struggle silently with feelings they never name. He felt that the film used the Western setting as a backdrop, but didn't understand or honor what it actually meant to live that life. Elliott also felt that by casting someone like Cumberbatch, the film sent a message. Anyone could wear a hat and be a cowboy. To Elliott, that wasn't just false, it was disrespectful. He once said, "I've spent my life trying to keep this genre alive, not turn it into something unrecognizable." That's why, even as criticism rolled in, he stood his ground. He wasn't interested in modern twists or emotional depth, if it meant losing the heart of what Westerns were meant to be. Stories about grit, loyalty, and the kind of silence that says more than words ever could. Actor number 3, Ashton Kutcher. Sam Elliott has always treated acting as something sacred. To him, it's not just a job, it's a calling. It takes years of discipline, emotional control, and respect for the story. So when he crossed paths with Ashton Kutcher, a man who seemed to come from a different Hollywood altogether, Elliott knew he was in for a tough time. Elliott came from a generation that believed in character over clout. He built his career on subtle performances, slow-burning roles, and a deep connection to his characters. Ashton Kutcher, on the other hand, symbolized something else entirely: the rise of New Hollywood. Kutcher's path, from goofy sitcom star on that 70s show, to leading man in light romantic comedies, to tech entrepreneur and social media icon, represented a shift in the industry that Elliott deeply disliked. To Elliott, Kutcher was more about charm and followers than craft and commitment. He once said privately, "Acting is not a launch pad for apps or memes. It's a discipline, a responsibility." This fundamental difference would play out in real time when both men were cast in the same series. Netflix's The Ranch paired Elliott and Kutcher as a father-son duo running a Colorado ranch. On paper, the show looked like a strong blend of old and new, but behind the scenes, things weren't nearly as smooth. Elliott came in prepared every day. He was focused, punctual, and serious about the work. Kutcher, while friendly and easygoing, had a looser approach, ad-libbing lines, joking around, and bringing a casual energy to the set. Elliott didn't blow up or make a scene. That's not his style. But the tension was there, quietly simmering. Crew members reported hearing Elliott vent privately. "He's a decent guy," Elliott would say, "but no real actor." That wasn't personal. It was philosophical. Elliott simply didn't think Kutcher had the depth or dedication acting required. The two remained professional on screen. But off-screen, there was no real connection. No mutual respect. No sense of creative partnership. Elliott's criticisms weren't about Kutcher's popularity or success. He understood that audiences loved him. What bothered Elliott was what Kutcher represented. "He acts like a guy who saw acting on YouTube," Elliott once remarked. To him, Kutcher didn't bring emotional truth or character depth. He brought surface-level charm, quick delivery, and an eye on what would trend or get clipped online. Where Elliott relied on stillness, breath, and silence to speak volumes, Kutcher relied on punchlines and facial reactions. Elliott also felt that Kutcher's presence on the show undercut the emotional weight the ranch was supposed to carry. The show touched on real issues, family loss, economic struggle, rural identity. But Elliott felt that Kutcher's light tone often pulled viewers away from those core themes. "He's all polish and no grit," Elliott reportedly told a friend, "and this work deserves grit." In Elliott's view, Kutcher embodied a growing problem in Hollywood: the rise of personality over performance, followers over fundamentals, fame over feeling. For Elliott, the problem wasn't just Ashton Kutcher. He was a symbol of a larger change. Elliott watched as casting choices started favoring actors with Instagram followings over those with acting resumes. Scripts were adjusted for shareable moments. Directors gave less attention to nuance, more to pacing and edits. And that shift disturbed him. He felt the craft he'd spent a lifetime honoring was being hollowed out, turned into content instead of story. With Kutcher, it felt like that shift had arrived right in his own scene partner. To be clear, Elliott didn't hate Kutcher as a person. By most accounts, they got along well enough. But when the cameras stopped rolling, there was no depth to their partnership, no shared respect for the process. "It was just acting," Elliott would say. Nothing more. To Elliott, those words weren't casual. They were a sign of disappointment. He wanted acting to mean something again. He wanted studios to stop chasing algorithms and start chasing truth. He wanted young actors to care more about character than camera angles. And in his mind, Ashton Kutcher wasn't part of that solution. He was part of the problem. Unlike his criticism of Benedict Cumberbatch, Elliott never went public with his feelings about Kutcher. But those who worked on the ranch knew how he felt. It wasn't rage or ego. It was quiet frustration from a man who had seen the industry change too much, too fast. To Sam Elliott, the set was a sacred place. Kutcher, with all his charm and casual ease, brought a tone that Elliott felt cheapened the work. He didn't explode, he didn't storm off set, but he never forgot it. And when asked years later about his time on the ranch, Elliott simply said, "It was a job." For someone who speaks volumes with very few words, that said everything. Actor number 4, Nicolas Cage. When it comes to acting styles, Nicolas Cage is one of Hollywood's boldest and most unpredictable names. His performances are often loud, eccentric, and emotionally explosive. For many fans, that's exactly what makes him great. But for Sam Elliott, that style represents everything he doesn't want acting to become. The two actors worked together on Ghost Rider, 2007, and while the experience was professionally smooth, Elliott left the project with strong opinions, ones he's hinted at over the years without naming names. At the heart of Elliott's discomfort was a deep clash in acting philosophy. Elliott is known for his quiet intensity. He believes in restraint, subtle expression, and emotional control. His characters speak with their eyes, not with raised voices or wild gestures. Nicolas Cage, on the other hand, is the definition of chaos on screen. Flailing limbs, bugged-out eyes, sudden outbursts, and unexpected accents. It's all part of his high-octane, one-of-a-kind style. He's a performer who brings energy and risk to every role, whether it fits or not. To Elliott, Cage's approach looked more like noise than nuance. "He's always swinging for the fences," Elliott reportedly told a close friend. But not every scene is a home run derby. Elliott saw chaos instead of brilliance. To him, acting was about presence, not volume. During Ghost Rider, Elliott played the mysterious Carter Slade, a calm, ghostly cowboy who mentored Cage's fiery, over-the-top Johnny Blaze. The contrast between their characters matched their real-life energies. On set, Elliott remained polite and professional, but he kept his distance. There were no arguments or dramatic moments, just a quiet disconnect. They did their scenes, shook hands, and moved on. Crew members noticed the dynamic. One said, Elliott wasn't rude, but he was distant, like he was doing his job and waiting to clock out. While Elliott has never publicly called out Cage by name, some of his past comments on modern acting left little doubt about who he had in mind. Elliott once said, "The most powerful performances don't shout, they simmer." That line perfectly sums up how he sees the craft. He believes real emotion lies in stillness, not spectacle. Silence can be louder than any scream. A single glance, held for just a second too long, can break hearts. Cage doesn't play that game. His style is bigger, wilder, and always at full throttle. Some love it. Others, like Elliott, feel it misses the point. In another interview, Elliott spoke about an unnamed actor by saying, "More firework than flame. Big bang, no heat." While he didn't mention Cage directly, the description fit. The message was clear. Elliott didn't see depth in the chaos. He felt that Cage's approach turned acting into a circus act, flashy, unpredictable, and often exhausting. It wasn't grounded. It wasn't connected to truth. It was show over soul. Elliott's frustration with Cage went beyond personal taste. To him, Cage symbolized a much bigger issue in modern cinema, the shift from storytelling to spectacle. Elliott has long warned about what he sees as a disturbing trend in Hollywood. Stories are becoming noisier, characters are louder, emotions are exaggerated. Movies are being made not to say something, but to shock, entertain, or go viral. In Cage's performances, Elliott saw that shift in full force. The kind of acting that once demanded patience and stillness was being replaced by high-speed, high-volume chaos. Substance was being drowned out by style. He once said, "We're not making movies anymore. We're making noise." To Elliott, acting should be art, not entertainment. He doesn't believe every actor needs to whisper their lines or avoid big emotions, but he does believe that truth should come first. And Cage, in his view, abandoned that truth in favor of wild swings. Even in Ghost Rider, a film filled with supernatural fire and comic book action, Elliott brought a grounded presence to every scene. He whispered when others shouted. He stood still while the world burned around him. Cage, of course, did the opposite. And the contrast didn't sit well with Elliott. Their time on set didn't lead to fights or public drama, but the divide between Elliott and Cage was clear. One was rooted in discipline and tradition, the other in experimentation and unpredictability. Fans continue to love Cage for his madness, and Elliott respects that every actor has their own way. But when asked about his experiences in the film, Elliott once simply said, "Some roles are about balance, others just burn out." Actor number 5, Jeff Bridges. Not every falling out is loud. Some hurt more because of how quietly they happen. That's what makes Sam Elliott's broken friendship with Jeff Bridges one of the most painful chapters in his story. It wasn't fueled by betrayal or public fights. It faded, slowly and silently, like smoke from a dying fire. There was a time when Sam Elliott and Jeff Bridges were nearly inseparable in the eyes of Hollywood. Two men with gravelly voices, calm energy, and the kind of grounded presence that couldn't be faked. They weren't just respected actors, they were the real deal. Their bond was sealed in The Big Lebowski, the Coen brothers' cult classic that turned both into enduring icons. Elliott played the mysterious stranger, narrating the story of Bridges' iconic slacker, the Dude. Though they didn't share many scenes, the chemistry between them was undeniable. Off-screen, They shared laughs, mutual admiration, and a friendship built on quiet respect. They were men who didn't crave the spotlight. They let their work do the talking. They shared values, discipline, authenticity, and a belief in the purity of the craft. In many ways, they were cut from the same cloth. But everything changed after Bridges won the Oscar for Crazy Heart in 2010. Elliott celebrated the win privately, but couldn't help noticing the subtle changes that followed. Bridges, once known for his laid-back, down-to-earth nature, began appearing in glossy fashion spreads and political fundraisers. He started showing up more on red carpets, dressed by top designers, and making headlines for his activism as much as his acting. He became harder to reach, less grounded, more curated, Elliott said to a close friend. To most, it looked like Bridges was simply enjoying the rewards of success, but to Elliott, it felt like a shift in character, a departure from the simple, honest man he used to know. A man who used to show up in denim and boots now looked like he belonged on a magazine cover instead of a ranch. It wasn't about the clothes or causes. It was about a growing distance, one that Elliott didn't expect and didn't understand. What hurt Elliott the most wasn't ego or rivalry. It wasn't about fame or politics. It was about values. Their friendship had been built on shared beliefs, on staying grounded, being true to oneself, and never chasing the spotlight. But after Bridges' Oscar win, Elliott felt that foundation slowly crumbling. He didn't feel betrayed. He felt abandoned. It's not that he changed, Elliott reportedly told someone. It's that he showed me who he always was. For Elliott, who holds loyalty and consistency above all, that realization cut deep. The bond he thought was unbreakable had started to fade, not because of one moment, but because of slow, silent drift. The phone calls stopped. The visits dried up. The trust that once came so easily now felt like something from a different life. There was no fight, no dramatic fallout, just distance. Over time, Elliott and Bridges stopped showing up at the same film festivals. They stopped supporting each other's projects. Industry insiders noticed that they were never in the same room anymore, even when they were invited to the same events. It was a slow realization, one close friend said, that the man Sam once stood beside now stood somewhere else entirely. Elliott, known for keeping his emotions close to the chest, never aired his feelings in interviews. But those close to him said he carried the silence with him. It wasn't anger. It was loss. He respected Bridges' talent. He didn't resent his success. But he mourned the friendship they once had, the long talks, the mutual understanding, the unspoken bond between two men who had walked the same road. In a rare moment of openness, Elliott once said, "Some people stay who they are. Others change with the wind. I don't hate them. I just miss who they were." That single line said everything. For a man who values consistency and quiet strength, watching a friend become someone else, no matter how slowly, is one of the deepest cuts. And so, the friendship that once symbolized brotherhood and authenticity became just another memory for Elliott. A reminder that even the strongest bonds can weaken, not from betrayal, but from time, change, and the quiet choices people make. Actor number 6. Jared Leto. Sam Elliott has a deep respect for acting. To him, it's not about fame, noise, or headlines. It's about telling the truth through a character, quietly, honestly, and without ego. So when he hears the name Jared Leto, one word comes to mind: overkill. Elliott doesn't see Leto as a bad actor, but he does see him as the symbol of a growing problem in Hollywood. A problem where method acting becomes a performance in itself, and not in a good way. Sam Elliott's biggest issue with Leto isn't personal. It's about what Leto represents. Elliott has spent decades working with focus and humility. He believes real acting happens without making a big deal out of it. The camera rolls, the scene plays, and the actor disappears into the moment. But with Leto, the acting never stops, even when the cameras do. To Elliott, that's not dedication. That's drama. He's called it theatrics masquerading as talent. In his eyes, Leto turns commitment into a circus. The effort becomes the story, not the character. And Elliott sees that as the opposite of what acting should be. Jared Leto is known for extreme method acting. His behind-the-scenes behavior often grabs more attention than his roles. And that's where Elliott draws the line. Leto's time as the Joker is one of the most talked-about examples. He reportedly sent live rats, used condoms, and even a dead pig to fellow cast members. He refused to break character for the entire shoot. Some called it commitment. Others, like Elliott, saw it as chaos. Later, during Morbius, Leto used crutches and moved painfully slow between takes, even off camera. Crew members said it added hours to the shooting schedule. For Elliott, that wasn't hard work. It was a waste of time. He believes sets should be safe, focused spaces. When one actor turns everything into a psychological game, the work suffers. Acting shouldn't make everyone else's job harder, Elliott once said in a private conversation. It should make the story better. Although Elliott and Leto have never worked together on screen, they almost did. Years ago, Elliott was attached to a film in its early development stages. The script was strong, the director solid. He was ready to sign on. Then, he heard Leto had been cast as the lead. Elliott didn't argue. He didn't complain. He just left. There was no statement, no comment to the press, just a quiet decision to walk away. A crew member later shared, he heard Leto's name and simply said, "I'm out." That was it. For Elliott, it wasn't about Leto as a person. It was about the kind of energy he brings to a project. And Elliott didn't want to be part of that. He knew what would happen. Long delays, off-screen drama, headlines about behavior instead of performance. He didn't want to be in the middle of a spectacle. So he stepped away without noise, just as he always does. At the root of Elliott's problem with Leto is a clear difference in values. Elliott believes in stillness, in truth, in letting the character breathe through natural emotion, not forced effort. He said, "Great acting doesn't scream, it listens." To Elliott, the best actors don't need to shock anyone. They just need to connect with the script, with the moment, and with the audience. That's where he sees Leto falling short. He feels Leto is more concerned with impressing people than moving them. Another quote from Elliott says it best. "If it takes that much effort to act, maybe you're trying too hard." That wasn't a jab, it was a warning. Acting is about empathy, not ego. About telling the story, not becoming the story. Jared Leto and Sam Elliott couldn't be more different. Leto brings intensity, transformation, and unpredictability. He disappears into roles by changing everything about himself. His voice, his walk, even his behavior off-screen. It's bold, it's risky, and it's loud. Elliott, meanwhile, doesn't believe in any of that. He shows up, he delivers. He steps back. In Elliott's world, acting is like a good campfire. Quiet, warm, and lasting. In Leto's world, it's fireworks. Big, bright, and over fast. That difference is more than just a style choice. It's a belief system. Elliott thinks the rise of Leto-style acting shows a larger shift in Hollywood, one where process becomes more important than product, where actors turn sets into performance pieces, where spectacle replaces sincerity. Some of these names were expected, others, not so much. One thing's clear: Sam Elliott's silence is over. For more unexpected Hollywood truths and bold reveals, like, share, and subscribe to stay in the loop.